Hello and welcome to our podcast today, which is on the subject of motivation. I'm Linda Brindle, psychotherapist in the Psychology in Schools team in Suffolk, and I'm joined by assistant psychologist Ellis Blythe. Hello, Ellis.
Hi, Linda.
On our podcast today, we're really pleased to have Alfie, a young person who's currently studying at sixth form and also has a role as a youth commissioner for West Suffolk Youth Advisory Board. Hi, Alfie.
Hi, it's West Norfolk, but thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alfie, for correcting me. And finally, we've also got joining us today Nikki, who's a parent of a young lad who's, well, he's 12, isn't he? So just moving into those sort of teenage years. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Linda. Yeah, it's nice to join you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, today our podcast is going to give an opportunity for us to consider motivation. And I guess we'll have time to think both about the challenges faced by our young people at the moment and also have time to think about what young people might find helpful to support them. So let's just think really broadly to start with about some of your experiences about low motivation.
To start with, when they started their online sessions, he was having 5 hours of screen time because he was slower getting it all done. So he desperately wanted to complete it all. So he was working the extra time, then it was running straight into the next session. So then his eyes were sore. He had a migraine the following day, so he couldn't do it. So that then knocked him back as well, because he then was saying, well, why should I do this if I'm going to end up feeling so ill with it all? So we had to work with the teachers to break that down. But there was that sense of trying to help him realise that even if he just achieved a little bit, it was still worth doing. And that's really how we started the day, to say, okay, let's do what we can do today. If we don't get it all done, that doesn't matter, but let's do something, and let's do something well.
Okay.
In something that I've picked up from you, Nikki, and also from Alfie is the expectation that young people and ourselves have during lockdown and what we can achieve. So Alfie, you mentioned that A-levels are understandably the hardest aspect of education for our young people. And Nikki, you said that, you know, if your son can't get the work done, then what's the point? And I think sometimes in lockdown, we've got to taper our expectations a little bit to sort of say, well, let's be kind to ourselves and realize this is such a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And it's something that's completely new to us. And actually, we've just got to do the best that we can. And even if it is, like you said, Nikki, just achieving a little bit towards what we need to do, and realizing that yeah, we might not be able to do everything we would as normal.
I think that's very much what we found, is to lower your expectations, but also to know that that's okay. I think before we would have expected high expectations. Let's work to the best. Let's do everything we can to achieve this. But actually to say, it's okay if we don't achieve it. So let's lower those expectations, because you're more likely to achieve them. And then that will bring more motivation for your young person if they can actually achieve what they've set out to do.
And I think one of the things you also mentioned, Nikki, was that point of breaking things down into smaller steps as well. I certainly know that's something that my daughters used to find a real challenge, is sort of getting started on work to begin with. And the more we leave work, it then piles up and it can feel very unmanageable. And that's, I guess, a real issue around the impact of avoidance. The more we avoid doing those things, the tasks, especially when it comes to study and work, there will be constantly additional tasks being set, can easily feel very overwhelming and make us want to give up. And I know my daughters felt that actually breaking down into very small steps, and perhaps either just doing a plan for the work and then having a break and then coming back the next day and doing a little bit more, was more helpful than trying to just sort of plow on through something that almost felt just too unmanageable, that it wasn't even worth starting. Alfie, do you have any tips with regards to what you've found helpful with that regard?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything Nikki said. Breaking it down to small steps does help. But at the same time, I find myself in some of my lessons getting a long list of tasks. It's not fun having to work from long lists of work. So my teacher, one of my teachers, she took a different approach, and she started suggesting that we watch clips instead. So she set a few clips, told us to take notes at our own pace, understood that we were going through quite a lot. And I thought that really helped. I actually retained quite a lot of that knowledge. And even shows on Netflix, like sometimes you just need to get away from the whole side of school. And although you can't do that when you're actually in school before COVID, during COVID, it's a quite nice escape.
So it sounds like, Alfie, that teacher was really trying to understand the experience that you would be having at home, trying to manage all this online learning, and the significant difference that is, as you described much earlier, about not having teachers on tap and not having the motivation and the sort of engagement of your friends and fellow students around that can help be really stimulating, can create perhaps, you know, a passion around a bit of work that you're interested in, or excitement, or at least a fact that a feeling that you're doing it together with other people.
Yeah, so group work in school, definitely one of the best parts, because although some people don't prefer it, I'm one of those people that do, because when I'm sat in an online class, you've got a few little icons at the bottom, those are your peers, and then you've got one camera for your teacher who keeps that turned on.
And I guess what I'm hearing that teacher was doing was really trying to understand your perspective and sort of create different routes for you to do your learning. And I guess that's really relevant for parents and carers, really, in thinking about how to support their young people with learning at home, because the normal school timetable, as Alfie's just said, Nikki, just doesn't fit when you're doing it all at home, and things do have to be different. And you've talked about a change in expectations. Is there anything else that you felt has been really important in terms of supporting your son day to day with sort of managing the schoolwork pressure and expectations?
Yeah, I think one of the ways we've done that is we've still worked very closely with the school teachers. We've emailed them to say what is happening with our son, what he can and can't do. And they've also realised that actually he needs more help in some areas. So they have said to us, these are the key areas that you need to do. And if you only do this, then that's fine. So we then also, as a parent, we don't feel that we're failing, because sometimes you think, oh, if you're letting your child do less than they should do, am I not a good parent and I'm not supporting them? But actually having the support from the school to say, we acknowledge that this is difficult for the children. We acknowledge that this is an expectation that they can reach, and this is what we can support them in. So the school have been very good. So I would just suggest, as one way, keep in touch with the parents and keep in touch with the teachers, have that parent-teacher liaison, because it's so important. And one of the other things we agreed was that we would have the information sent to us in advance, because we were trying to print the information off during the lesson and it was just taking too much time. So a very simple thing, they now send us the information in advance, we can print it off, and then my son's got it there to look at, so he can easily focus and not just hear the instructions being given. So that's been a really practical thing that has helped. And then thirdly, when they've had lessons like PE, they're no longer doing theory, so anatomy and physiology. They're now saying, go out for a walk, go out and play some football in the garden and things like that. So that's been really helpful too, because it's saying it's okay not to be at the screen all the time. Go for a walk, get the fresh air, get the things that are going to help you focus and concentrate more as well. So that's been a really good adjustment.
Thank you. Yes, and I guess that importance of moving around and exercise and just having a break. You know, I've decided I've got to do that as well in my day, that I would in a different way to what I normally would, because again, I'm just at the desk all day as well. And so, you know, I think it's all these things are equally relevant for us as adults with what we're trying to accomplish as for all young people and children. So I guess we've talked about some of the strategies that you're using and finding helpful, and I'm just thinking about where the difficulties with motivation are also sort of fed in by maybe a young person who's already struggling with anxiety or low mood, and trying to understand, you know, how those things also can feed in to make motivation hard. Ellis, I don't know if you have any thoughts about what sort of additional challenges young people can face if they're also really struggling with anxiety or low mood at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a struggle for those young people. And we know that low mood and anxiety can really knacker us out and make it so difficult to engage in anything really. You know, even getting out of bed can be something quite difficult. There's a model by Professor Paul Gilbert who splits the brain into 3 different systems, and it links quite nicely with motivation. So one of the systems is called a threat system, which is activated when we're not feeling too great, when we feel like we might be in danger. So anxiety feeds into that really nicely. We have a soothing system, which activates when we're feeling a bit more relaxed and we're quite comfortable. And our last system is a drive system, which is all about our motivation. And the idea is to try and balance these systems out. But we can't activate that drive and motivation system if our threat system is blaring and, you know, we're in that fight or flight response all the time. So young people that are experiencing low mood and anxiety are really finding themselves trapped at the moment in that threat system, in that fight and flight response. And it's trying to figure out ways to bring them down, to regulate their emotions before we start trying to introduce work and tasks that they need to be motivated for. Otherwise, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, that because we can't do the work because we're feeling so anxious or low, that then we feel even worse about ourselves and become quite self-critical. I don't know if that's something that Alfie or Nikki, you found yourselves when you can't do a task. There's a lot of self-criticism that can come about.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. So I took part in a course yesterday actually around a similar sort of topic, and we looked at 2 different ways you can split the mind into. So along with your 3 on your model, we focused on the way that the mind can be split into the prefrontal cortex, but also the internal components. So your prefrontal cortex is sort of like your emotional mind, and no, sorry, your intellectual mind, not your emotional mind. Your intellectual mind, and that's what's going to give you the motivation, the ability, the confidence to go and do something, and just sort of engage you in a problem-solving sort of thinky way that you might find yourself doing at school. So if you're sat in a classroom with your teacher and they're asking you a question, so they know that you know the answer, and you can have that one-on-one. They're trying to help you problem solve, trying to help you understand it in a different sort of way. But what I found a lot in lockdown is you're engaging your emotional mind, which is your internal components. They tend to be your fight or flight responses. So you see a task, you run away from it, or you'll see a task, you'll try and take it on, but you're building up too much stress, anxiety, that sort of thing, and your stress bucket, if you like, is about to overflow because you've got too many little components that are building up on top of each other, and there's no way to filter out anything from that bucket. And as soon as you reach that threshold point where it's about to tip over, you're really going to struggle and you're going to feel like doom and the end of the world is near. So it's a really important thing with Nikki's PE example, helping them get outside, get engaged, do that sort of thing, rather than learning about anatomy and the physiology of the body. It's much easier to go outside and kick a football about or go for a walk, just to turn off that switch, stop that bucket filling up, empty it completely, and then return back to the classroom or your computer, I guess, and sit down and try and engage in another lesson.
Thank you. I think that was a really good description of the sort of importance of acknowledging what's going on physiologically in our body and also in our mind, and how that impacts on our ability to focus and get on with the tasks that we can have in front of us. So yes, you can do those things by watching your Netflix, as you talked about earlier, maybe having exercise, or just giving your mind a total break by thinking about something totally different. there's many different ways, aren't there, that you sort of try to calm down that emotional part of the brain, and so you can reconnect with that thinking part of the brain, which then enables you to do those study tasks. And when we're just sitting at our desk and we're feeling those stress emotions coming up and maybe a pressure of a deadline, then that can really feed into that emotional part of the brain. So of course, inadvertently, it becomes harder and harder to concentrate, doesn't it? And so I guess that's a really helpful message for us to hold on to as parents and carers of young people, that, you know, breaks are actually really vital on all different levels, to enable us to re-engage and settle. And so going back to Ellis's model, that sense of we're not in that emotional threats stage, we want to get out of that, so we need to do things to calm ourselves and settle ourselves, and then we can reconnect with that part of the brain. Thanks, Alfie, that's really helpful. So I'm just wondering, we've thought about trying to understand what's going on for a young person, like the importance of doing that as parents in trying to help connect, because we know that if we can sit and understand the difficulties, the reasons for the challenges around motivation, then we're much likely to be in a better place to support that young person. So being curious and just wondering what's going on for them. And we know sometimes it's tricky with young people. You know, our young people don't always want to speak to us. Maybe just observing, or we use a phrase wondering a lot. So just even having a guess and saying, I'm wondering if you're really struggling at the moment, gives our young person actually an opportunity to say, actually, no, I'm not. I'm just feeling, you know, I just didn't sleep, but everything's fine, mum. Or actually it gives an opportunity for an opening. Is there any ways in which Alfie or Nikki, you found that a parent or another person connecting with you and trying to understand has been helpful? Any particular strategies that work or don't work for you?
I found as a parent, it's just been so important to have encouragement and empathy, and just to encourage your child and say, do you know what, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Don't give up. You're doing a good job. Just those words of encouragement can make such a difference, and get alongside him. But also to have empathy and say, I understand what you're going through. And as a grown-up, I feel that too sometimes, but that's okay to feel that, and giving them permission to feel okay in what they're doing. So I found both of those, the encouragement and the empathy, really empowering for my child to be able to accept that. And also just to continually speak positively over them and saying, you're doing fantastic. This is brilliant. This is really great. And really everything he does, whether it's schoolwork, whether it's something outside of school, whether it's his reading, whether it's doing tasks at home, just that positive encouragement all the time. And we found that has really been so helpful as parents to do that. And just linking in with that as well, just being kind to them, you know, saying, let's go have some fun. Let's have fun together, which gives me a break from my time as well with working. And it gives them permission to be children. And I think we've lost that during lockdown, allowing them to be children and actually to have fun, to go out and do the things that they would normally do. So I think it's really important, if you can interject fun into it, you'll increase the motivation as well.
I completely agree with Nikki, but I'd say mostly that works for a lot of the younger ages. For the older sort of side of us, hormones are raging, we're all a bit crazy. None of us actually want to go outside much anymore and kick a ball about, and that's really quite sad, I think. It's quite unfortunate as well. So for my family, I prefer to sort of keep to myself. I'm one of those people. I find it really hard to talk to people that aren't doing the same thing as I'm doing. So if it was me, if I was talking to a friend in my class, it'd be really easy to talk to them, sort of have a chat about how ridiculous this quantity of work is. It all makes sense, but when, say, my stepdad comes home, or my sisters, and they've come home, they've had a long day at work, and they try to sort of engage with me about how my school went that day, or so what kind of podcast I was doing that day or interview, it was really quite difficult because they don't understand sort of what I'm doing when they're away. I know that's obviously like when you're with your younger children, you're with them most of the day. But for us older ones, we feel quite isolated, and we don't have that connection as much anymore with our sort of guardians, if you like. And it's really quite difficult because I want to talk to people, but I don't know how to, because they can't sort of engage with me on the same level. They haven't gone through a lockdown in education. They haven't gone through a lockdown where you were trying to do a podcast or talk to people about mental health or motivation or anything like that. But they get on with their lives and I get on with my life, and it's really quite difficult, and it's a really big struggle for a lot of people my age. Yeah, so I really wish that we could get engaged on the same level that you do with your son, Nikki, because that's a really positive thing.
Alfie, do you have any ideas of what people could learn from what you're saying about what could help?
I've said in the past, in previous interviews, that sort of coming in and talking to your child, if they're in the older end, I guess, is quite a good thing. Obviously, they're not going to want to talk to you as much if they don't understand. The conversation might be quite awkward. You're not really going to be flowing like you once did. But at the same time, still having that little bit of conversation every day does help, and it does sort of break away from the reality that your life is just school. You wake up in the morning, go to school, come back, play a bit of a video game or watch a bit of TV, go to sleep, do the same thing the next day. So having that conversation and sort of relation with a parent is quite nice. But at the same time, for young people in my situation, if you're not willing to talk to people, go and find help somewhere else. So whether that's a therapist, a friend, or someone that's on the same level as you. Also, if you're going to go out, do some exercise. As I said before, sort of clear your head, engage that intellectual mind, and you'll be able to stay motivated. It might even encourage you to go and talk to someone about it. So definitely, if you find yourself in that spot, use that guidance.
Thank you, Alfie. I think that's really helpful to hear. And I guess I'm just thinking about you talking about being just checking in almost just with your child, even if they're not wanting to talk a lot about what's going on for them, and the importance of that. And I guess it's looking for those opportunities and moments, isn't it? So some people like to have a meal together, so that's the time in the day that they're all together, or maybe it's just something around when you're hanging around in the kitchen together and somebody's cooking and somebody's washing up. And I guess that makes me think that we know that especially for teenagers, just parents being available, being around creates opportunities, even for those little conversations or that joke or that laugh about something that's totally separate from really what's going on, but it helps maintain connection in a really tricky time. I think the other thing that you're saying around where people are struggling with their own emotions or to talk about it is that if you are someone that isn't someone that finds it helpful to be talking to others, then remembering that some people find journaling, it's a really American term, but writing things down is really helpful for them, or expressing emotions through drawings or art can be really helpful too. So I guess that's worth holding in mind, and just thinking about people who find it hard to talk with people they know and seeking support. I just highlight that in Suffolk and Norfolk, we've got the Couth online counselling provision, which is for 11 to 25-year-olds, a confidential counselling space, which is an amazing opportunity for young people that perhaps find it much harder to have the support and connection of people that they know to talk about difficult things. So I just highlight that there as well. Okay, so we've talked about some of the things that are tricky, and sort of even connecting and trying to understand sometimes can be tricky. I wonder if there's any particular tips of what you have found has worked really well for you in terms of improving motivation for yourself or another person that you're with in the family or a friend? Any particular tips that you'd feel that you could share with others listening to this podcast today?
Well, definitely exercise. I've covered that before, but a little bit a day definitely is going to sort of help your motivation levels. You're going to do something early in the morning, for example. You've taken that action, you've taken that time to get up, and you've gone out of your way to get dressed for a run. Quickly go out, 30 minutes maybe maximum, and you're set for the day. So you feel confident enough and your blood is pumping, it's rushing, it's getting into your brain, you're actively thinking. So definitely exercise helps you keep up your levels of motivation. In regards to other stuff, I'd say find a hobby. So I'm passionate about drawing, that sort of thing, that area. But for other people, that might be music, it might be dance, it could be anything, to be honest. Anything that makes you feel happy in yourself, something that's different from education, or just any kind of daily struggle that you find yourself. People they talk about writer's block. So if you're experiencing writer's block, just an example, come away, do something different for a while, go for a walk, read a book, do something, just anything that makes you happy, really, and then go back to it. So you need to take yourself away and you need to do stuff in small amounts, because those small amounts will give you the biggest boost of energy and the most motivation to keep going. And then you also can take yourself back from that later on and then go back to it when you have more ideas.
I think all of that is true. And even though my son is much younger, there is still that whole thing about getting them to think positively about themselves, getting them out and things, doing things like that. So I think all of that, I really agree with what Alki is saying. One of the things we do as a family, we do try to have that family time away from anything to do with school. And I think that's really important as motivation as well, to say, let's put in our diaries time where it's just family time, where we don't talk about school, because I think it's so easy to continually talk about school, talk about lockdown. And so actually to say, let's get away from all of that for some time, not have that as part of our discussion, can also then be a motivator, because it's refocusing you on the positive things and the things that we can be thankful for and the things that we can be grateful for too. And as a family, one of the things we find really useful is at lunchtime if we're working from home and things, but predominantly at the dinner time, is just looking and saying, well, what's one thing that we can be thankful for today? So even if it's just been doing the online stuff, there's still something that we might be thankful for. And that might have been the good weather. It might have been able to get outside, might have been the snow recently that brought a lot of fun back into the children and us as well. So just that motivator to think about what is still good, what's still good that's happening, even in the midst of lockdown. And that's a real motivator, because it lifts your spirits, it lifts your focus again, and it helps you realise that actually it's not all doom and gloom. We can still keep going. There's still hope, and we can just press into those good times as well.
I think that's absolutely right, Nikki. I think being playful and having that fun really helps to generate some optimism about the future, when actually it's all doom and gloom at the moment. And when you look in the news, although there's positive things about vaccines, it's still a really difficult situation to be in. So I think that's absolutely right. Trying to foster that optimism about the future by being playful is really important. Just to think about sort of extra tips, I've found personally that breaking a daunting task down into as smaller pieces as humanly possible is really useful. So I'm in the process of writing my dissertation for my master's, which feels impossible. So what I'm doing instead is just trying to focus an hour an evening on it. Doesn't matter what I get done, as long as I do an hour and put in that effort, then that's a job well done in my eyes. And something that a colleague has said to us as well that helps her with motivation is pairing a good task, something that they enjoy, with something that maybe they don't enjoy so much. So in her case, she will listen to audiobooks, a very specific audiobook when she goes running. And so she knows she'll only ever listen to that book if she goes running, and she wants to hear the rest of the story and what's happening. So in order to do that, she has to go for a run. So I think if we can try and find ways to pair good things or encouraging things with tasks that maybe we don't really want to do as much, and that could be a good way of building some motivation up.
And I guess linked in with that, you could do the same thing with work. And I don't know, Alfie, you've talked about that sort of the enjoyment that you've got from group work and how that's really tricky at the moment. And I guess that idea of pairing, doing those sort of tricky tasks, if there's anything you can do as a sort of group together with others. I don't know if you've thought about that, or other people are doing that as a way to still encourage that connection, so that we know for young people your age, social connection can be so key. It's more important than family, because you're on the cusp of adulthood, whatever that means, and at whatever point you feel at it, but actually the social connection and that independence and making those own links with others is so vital. I don't know your thoughts on that, Alfie.
Yeah, so I didn't actually consider before this podcast Ellis's point of view about pairing two things together, having that motivation to, if you want to do something, this has to come as a sort of a add-on, if you like, with the running and the podcast book. Yeah, I completely agree with what Ellis said about pairing two activities together. If you're going to do something, try and find something else that will fit as a sort of consequence, not consequence, but like an extra, if you like. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, and I guess what we know is with perhaps younger children, you can sort of encourage them to do a task and then perhaps have a reward afterwards, and that will work for some older young people as well. But sometimes you need to think of different ways with older young people to get that inner motivation really triggered. And I guess what you were talking about, Alfie, with sort of finding a hobby is about ensuring that even whilst it's hard looking ahead, you can get some pleasure and enjoyment from what you're doing in the here and now. So, we hear of people that are doing all sorts of things in these lockdowns, which can sound amazing. But I guess what's important is that for each person is supported to work out what's going to make the difference to their day, so that they can really feel that they're getting some pleasure and fun and sense of achievement in their day, and still have a sense that they're working towards a bigger picture, even if how that pans out is unknown at the moment.
Yeah, some people, everyone's different. So some young people see or take the smaller wins for the day. So that might be doing a bit of a drawing for an hour a day. That might be their idea of, oh, I've succeeded that day. Tomorrow I'm gonna do the same thing. And gradually they'll get there. But for some people, the bigger goals, they want them. They're determined, and they will do anything they can to get it. And this lockdown has really stopped that quite a lot. But you hear about all these amazing things that people are doing during lockdown, and that's really inspiring for some people. And they want to go out and do those things. Depending on who you are, where you come from, what you've got available to you, resources, it's definitely difficult for a lot of young people to sort of find that motivation to start a task, no matter how big it is. So if you want to go for a massive long marathon walk, for example, and you want to raise money for a charity at the same time, some people find that easier than others, because we're all at different places in our lives. Some people will have been sort of conditioned to think that that's what you need to do with your life. Some people think, oh no, I think I need to start with the smaller bits and work my way up to it. We're all at different points. So this motivation, I think on a general scale, should help a lot of people, but obviously it's quite hard to sort of single people out, because we all find things different and we all work our way towards it differently. And everyone needs to understand that just because someone's doing something doesn't mean that you need to be able to do the same thing. I think that's sort of taken a huge toll on a lot of people's mental health. They see their friends doing something, they want to do it too, but they might not be able to for certain reasons. So definitely our individual differences have impacted us a lot over this lockdown.
Thank you. And I think that what you've raised as we're drawing this podcast to the end is the importance of just thinking about the individual and what we need, that the unhelpfulness of comparisons with others, it can be inspirational, but it can also feed into self and how we look at self, and even how we're critical of self. And that in itself can then impede, as we talked about earlier, that ability to move forward and make any steps. So I guess what I'm hearing is that there's something really important for parents and young people, parents and carers of young people, to think about being really thoughtful of how the language they use with their young person, their expectations, and perhaps not getting too caught up in set tasks, but almost allowing flexibility to go with the flow of what a young person needs and look for those opportunities to connect, but also respect, where our young people are on their stage of development and what is realistic for them. So with our younger children, sometimes giving a range of choices gives a sense of autonomy and a sense of a feeling of control, and that can really help our young people take some control at a time when there's lots of uncertainty. But perhaps for the old young people like Alfie and people around your age, you just need those sort of that support and coming alongside, maybe gentle, sensitive questioning of, what would be helpful, or how can I support you? And perhaps parents take a more coaching role there, but recognizing that you're on the cusp of adulthood and you're working out these things yourself. So with support, that's almost the best learning for you to do at this stage.
Definitely 100%. And as I said before, every young person is different. So you're all going to have different ways of motivating yourself. So you need to find what's best for you. Just there's something out there for everyone. No matter how big or small it is. Some people have bigger goals, some people have smaller goals. It really doesn't matter. If it gets you out of the bed, gets you out of bed in the morning, that's a win. 100%, that's a win. If it keeps you going, that's a win. Just bear that in mind.
Thank you. And I guess just to pull this together, I guess lastly, for all of us, whether we're parents, carers, or young people, I guess what we're hearing is being kind to ourselves. As we've said, it's okay to not feel okay and have some hard days. We'll all probably have some hard days at the moment. We're all living in really tricky circumstances, and it is hard, whether you're a parent, a carer, or a young person. So looking after ourselves is really important, and being kind. And we know that being kind for ourselves actually is an enabling factor that will help to motivate us to do things. Actually, being critical of ourselves disables us and almost stops us from doing those things. So I guess a key message going forward is just take each day as it comes, look after yourself, and look for some opportunities to do things that you want to do within the day, as well as things that you need to do, so that you create some balance in the day. Okay, any last thoughts before we finish?
Yeah, so I think everything that's been mentioned today fits under a model put forward by Scott Geller, who's a psychologist, and that looks at 4 C's. So the first one is competence. So that's being able to have the skills to complete a task, having the knowledge to complete a task. And if we don't have those, then we're more likely to avoid it. We don't want to attempt a task that we think we're going to fail at. So in order to get that competence, it's about breaking tasks down, helping support our young people to figure out what they need to do and how they need to do it in order to achieve. The second C that Scott puts forward is choice. So we know that in lockdown, our young people are stripped of most of their autonomy and choice and control that they have. And really, if we have choice in what we do, our motivation to do it is tenfold. If we're forced into doing something, we lose our motivation to do it a lot of the time. I know this can be quite a scary idea for some parents perhaps, but by giving some control for our children and young people over how they approach their education, or even a small amount of control in a small aspect, maybe when they take their breaks or their schedule, rather than exactly what they do, can help us to feel more autonomized more valued and will help build motivation to complete a task. The third C is consequences. Now, this isn't a negative consequence because we know they deplete motivation. Trying to avoid failure definitely isn't a way to help us to crack on with a task. Instead, we need to be trying to strive for success or looking at positive reinforcement. I know that Nikki mentioned this earlier and how she's constantly giving encouragement to her son, which is key. And encouraging the effort that we put forward is the most important. It's not all about completing the task and how the task looks at the end. It's just about having a young person put forward the effort to complete a task. And that's really by encouraging and by praising that, we help to develop the intrinsic motivation, the want and desire to do more because we're proud of ourselves and how we do it. And the final C is community. And Alfie mentioned this earlier, and how home education can be quite isolating. We don't have classrooms that we sit in. We can't have conversations with our peers while we're doing the schoolwork because it's just the teacher speaking. And that's a really difficult thing for young people and for all of us, really, feeling isolated during this lockdown. And we know that isolation drains our motivation. So if we are not seeing anyone for a day, we might find it easier to stay in bed or, not get ready or show ourselves self-care. So encouraging community wherever we can, with shared difficulties, joining each other in doing classwork where we can, group activities, is really important for motivation. That old saying that a problem shared is a problem halved is something that really rings true, and community is massive in trying to achieve that.
I was just going to say one very quick thing. When I spoke to my son before doing this, I just said to him, what have we done as a mummy and daddy that's helped or supported you? And he says, you've supported me through life. And I just thought, well, as a parent, if we can support them through life, that's our biggest thing that we want to do.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm hearing there is that it's about a perspective beyond getting caught up in the minutiae of particular lessons or things that are meant to be done, and actually thinking about how we want to support young people to be ready for adult life and be able to live life to the full with all the potential that they have. Okay, that sounds like a great note to finish on. Thanks ever so much, Nikki and Alfie, especially for joining us for this podcast today. And we hope that people will find it helpful and you'll have some additional ideas for how you can support your young people. Thanks very much.